The arrivals board flickered above me, but I wasn't reading it anymore. I stood under its cold blue glow at gate C7, a small wrap box cradled in my hand. Silver paper tied with ribbon I'd saved from last year's Christmas chocolates. Inside was a brooch, vintage, her favorite color, green like the pine trees we used to cut together when she was little. She had said she'd be here by 10. She said, "Wait for me at the airport, Dad. I'll come get you." Like it was a promise, that was 5 hours ago. My legs ached from standing, but sitting felt too much like giving up. Around me, families wheeled bright luggage and called out names with joy in their throats. Children ran to grandparents with arms wide open. Hugs, laughter, the smell of cinnamon from the cafe near baggage claim. A woman in a red scarf kissed her father's cheek and whispered, "Merry Christmas, Daddy." He cried. I kept checking the doors. Each time they hissed open, hope kicked in my ribs. And then, the faces spilled through. None of them hers. I called once, voicemail. Called again, straight to it. At 3:17 p.m., I saw her, across the terminal. Her coat was navy, her gait quick, efficient. Beside her walked her husband, holding the smallest of their boys on his hip. The other two children trailed behind, giggling about something in their hands. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did and turned away. I didn't call out. Something in my chest folded quietly like paper under rain. I followed, not because I wanted to chase. I just didn't know what else to do. My feet moved on their own, slow and deliberate, the way you walk at a funeral. They crossed the street and entered a restaurant called The Hearth. I'd passed it earlier, big windows, glowing lights, paper snowflakes taped to the glass. Through the pane, I saw it all. A table set for 12, candles flickering, red napkins folded like roses. And her, my daughter, at the head of the table, lifting a glass of wine with a smile that didn't ache at the corners. There was a man beside her. Gray hair, jolly red sweater, and a Santa hat tipped to the side like a joke he'd just told. He was carving a turkey. The children leaned in close. One of them said, "Grandpa, can I have the drumstick?" I stood outside unnoticed, gift still in my hand. The ribbon had come undone. It was 2 days before Christmas, and I'd just finished folding her gift. The brooch was nestled in tissue paper, wrapped in silver foil from the drawer in the kitchen I still call the holiday drawer, even though no one's borrowed ribbon from it in years. I was on the phone with her, the hum of the fridge my only companion. She sounded distracted. There was movement in the background, a child asking for help with a game controller, a dog barking once, then being hushed. "Dad," she said, "I know it's short notice, but we decided to eat out this year. You know how chaotic the house gets. The kids are picky, and honestly, I just couldn't deal with the dishes again." I smiled into the phone. "That's perfectly fine, sweetheart. I can come to the house before dinner. Help with the boys. Read them something festive. I don't mind." There was a pause. No. Just meet us at the airport. I'll pick you up there, and then we'll head to the restaurant. That way it's easier. Less back and forth. Back and forth, as though I were a box to be picked up and dropped off. Still, I said, "Of course. Whatever's easiest." "Thanks, Dad," she replied, already distracted. "I'll text you the time. I need to check our reservation. Love you." The line went dead. I looked down at the ribbon in my hand. I'd tied it wrong, crooked and loose. I undid the knot, tried again. My fingers shook a little. Later that night, I stood at the bathroom mirror, brushing my teeth, and noticed a framed photo half tucked behind a scented candle. It was from the year before, when they came to my place for Christmas Eve. Just a quick visit, dropped in for hot cocoa and gifts. Her youngest had spilled marshmallows all over the rug, and we'd laughed about it. That was the last time they came to the house. I'd vacuumed the rug twice since then, but somehow the stain still showed faintly, like a memory that wouldn't wash out. The next day, I offered to bring a dish to the dinner. I texted, "Would you like me to bake the cranberry tart?" She replied 3 hours later, "Oh, that's sweet, Dad. But the restaurant's taking care of everything. No need." No need? I stared at those words longer than I should have. Not thank you, not sounds lovely, just no need. Like I'd offered to do something strange. I walked to the kitchen and opened the fridge out of habit. Inside, the tart crust was already chilling. I'd made it that morning, assuming she'd want it. She used to call it snow pie when she was 7. I left it there. Didn't throw it out. Couldn't. Instead, I stood at the kitchen sink, hands resting on the porcelain edge, and watched the neighbor string lights around their porch. A little girl in red pajamas ran in circles with a flashlight, giggling. Behind me, the house was still. My house. The same one I bought in '89 with a leaky roof and a dream that my kids would one day bring their kids back to it, but they never stay long. I turned off the kitchen light, the room going dim except for the tree in the corner. Small, artificial, but carefully decorated. I'd placed a tiny angel near the top, her favorite ornament. She made it in 2nd grade from pipe cleaners and paper doilies. It leaned slightly to the left no matter how I adjusted it. Like it was still trying to fly, but no longer knew how. The tart was still in the fridge. I'd checked twice that morning, not because I'd forgotten, but because somehow I kept expecting it to be gone. As if someone had come in quietly during the night and remembered me. Thought, he made this, we should bring it. But no, there it sat. Pale crust in a glass dish, wrapped in plastic that clung like a second skin. Untouched. I didn't have much appetite that morning, but I made breakfast anyway. Scrambled 2 eggs, made toast. I buttered it the way she liked. Soft, unsalted, spread all the way to the corners. I'd done it without thinking. Just muscle memory. The plate looked wrong sitting alone on my table, a second slice going cold. I left it there and sipped my coffee slowly. The tree in the corner blinked its warm yellow lights. A cheap timer I bought years ago at the drugstore. It clicked on at 6:45 sharp, just before sunrise, and clicked off at 10 p.m. every night. Steady. Predictable. Like I used to be. The angel at the top still leaned. I'd tried propping her straight with a bit of tape, even added a tiny paperclip to balance the wing that had folded in on itself, but still she tilted always to the left, like she was bowing to something no one could see. That morning, I vacuumed the hallway again, though it didn't need it. I checked the mailbox twice, even though it was Sunday and I knew better. The silence there felt heavier than usual. No card, no early, we can't wait to see you, Dad. Not even a flyer or a coupon. Just an empty tin box that echoed when I closed it. By lunchtime, I was back in the kitchen. I stood at the counter, unwrapped the tart, and looked at it as though it might offer a reason. The lattice was slightly crooked. I'd tried a new technique this year, twisted dough strips, brushed with egg and sugar. But my fingers don't work like they used to. Still, it was beautiful in its way. Earnest. Homemade. I didn't cover it again. I just left it out on the counter like maybe someone would walk in, see it, and say, "Oh, you remembered." By early afternoon, I opened the coat closet. Her scarf still hung there. A child's one, red with white pom-poms. She left it here when she was 9 and never took it back. I'd kept it all these years, washed it twice, even stitched the frayed end once when I thought she might want to wear it again. She never did. But I did. Every now and then, when the wind stung or the morning felt especially empty, I'd loop it around my neck before going to the store. It still smelled faintly like something sweet. Childhood, maybe, or some long-gone brand of detergent. At 3, I checked my phone. No new messages. I scrolled up to reread her last one. "Just wait at the airport, Dad. I'll come get you." The timestamp said Friday. It was Sunday now. Still, I packed a small bag. Just the gift, a change of clothes, and a book I never got around to reading. I wore my best winter coat, navy wool with silver buttons. The one she once said made me look distinguished. That had been 10 years ago, before the boys, before the dinners turned into quick lunches, before she started calling me Dad in the same tone she used for grocery reminders and lost keys. I locked the house behind me, carefully. The angel's light flickered once as I turned off the tree. She leaned, as always. I looked back just once, to make sure I hadn't left the tart out on the counter. I had, and I left it there. Let it sit in the quiet, its crust softening in the warmth of a house that no longer smelled like cinnamon or pine, just old wood, lemon soap, and something else now. Something like goodbye. A little after 4, I moved closer to the airport doors. The wind had picked up, not fierce, but enough to make me pull my coat tighter. I stood near the coffee kiosk outside Arrivals, where heat trickled from a vent above the doorway. The barista had offered me a sample cup earlier, peppermint mocha. I didn't much care for it, but I accepted it anyway, warmed my hands around it, and nodded politely. I watched families come and go. Some rushed, others wandered. Children with antlers on their heads, teenagers glued to their phones, couples wrapped in matching scarves. Then, suddenly, there she was, my daughter. Her coat was the same navy wool she wore last year, with the belt tied too high the way she always liked it. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders, and her face was turned slightly toward her husband, who said something that made her laugh. Not big, just a quick smile with her eyes. And then, the boys, all 3 of them. One carried a red balloon shaped like a reindeer. The other 2 chased each other around the luggage cart, their boots squeaking on the tile. I straightened, lifted my hand, but I didn't call out, not yet. Instead, I took one step forward, then another. My fingers gripped the strap of my bag. I saw her glance in my direction, just for a second. Her smile faltered, ever so slightly. Not in surprise, not in delight, just recognition. Like you'd spot someone you used to know at a train station and weren't sure whether to wave or not. She looked away before I could decide. She didn't stop. She reached for her husband's arm instead, leaned in to whisper something. He nodded, shifted the cart, and they walked on. Right past me. I could have called her name, could have said, "I'm here." Could have asked, "Didn't you see me?" But I didn't, because I had. I'd seen everything I needed to see in that half-second glance. That soft, reflexive flicker of her eyes past mine. Not cold, not cruel, but dismissive in the way you dismiss a thought you don't want to entertain. They crossed the street. I followed, slowly. Still, a part of me hoped. Maybe there'd been a mix-up. Maybe she'd turn around and wave. "Dad, there you are." But she didn't. Instead, she adjusted her scarf, nudged one of the boys gently ahead, and disappeared through the doors of a restaurant glowing with warm light and garlands. I stopped on the sidewalk outside. The hostess smiled at them, pointed to a table. A long one, set for many. Laughter spilled out the window like music. Then I saw him. The man in the red sweater, older than me, broad-shouldered, comfortable, slide into a chair beside her. The boys clamored toward him, one calling out, "Grandpa!" He lifted a fork and playfully tapped it against a glass. My daughter laughed again. I stood there forgotten. My fingers brushed against the gift in my coat pocket. The small box with the green brooch nestled inside. I didn't take it out. I didn't need to. I turned from the window and sat on a bench nearby. The peppermint mocha was still in my hand, lukewarm now. I took a sip, too sweet, too late. The gift in my coat pocket began to feel like a weight. Not in the physical sense, but as though it carried everything I hadn't said aloud in years. It pressed against my ribs with each shallow breath, as if reminding me what it was meant to be. A gesture of love, of memory, of inclusion. I sat on the bench outside the restaurant, just beyond the reach of the heat lamps, where the cold could find me. My hands rested in my lap, palms open. Through the window, I could still see them. The table was full of food, full of voices, full of light. A server brought over a platter. The man in the red sweater, their grandpa, began to carve the turkey. My daughter poured wine, her arm brushing his. One of the boys climbed onto his lap, laughing. She handed him a napkin. I watched her mouth move. Could almost hear the words, "You're making a mess, Dad." Dad. I blinked slowly, once, twice. There was no outrage in me, no sudden swell of tears or dramatic realization. Only quiet, the kind that settles in your bones and stays there. The kind that doesn't rise, doesn't scream. It just sinks. The world around me moved as it always did. Cars passed. Someone's suitcase clicked by on the sidewalk. From the speaker overhead, a Christmas song played faintly. Have yourself a merry little Christmas. I once sung it with her on a cold December night, when she was 5 and scared of the dark. She had hiccuped halfway through the second verse. We laughed so hard we forgot we were walking. No, she didn't laugh like that anymore. Not with me. My breath fogged slightly in the air. I watched it disappear. I reached into my pocket, fingers closing around the small box. I held it there, cradled in my palm. Then, without looking, I slipped it back in. I couldn't give it to her. Not like this. Not as someone she had to look through glass to forget. The striking detail, the one I'll never be able to unsee, was the paper crown. One of those cheap, crinkled things from a Christmas cracker. Gold, torn slightly at the edge. It sat askew on the other man's head. The children had put it there. A game, no doubt. But he wore it like it belonged. Like he'd earned it. She laughed as she adjusted it for him. And I sat outside the pane of glass, watching her give someone else my crown. Not out of malice. Not because she hated me, but because somewhere between growing up and growing away, she had stopped seeing me at all. That was the truth that settled over me like fresh snow. Soft, silent, covering everything I thought I'd built. I leaned forward slightly, resting my elbows on my knees. The cold seeped up through the bench, through my slacks, through the coat I'd bought just for today. My knees ached, and my heart, well, my heart didn't even protest anymore. It just stayed quiet, like it had been waiting for me to notice what it already knew. That I had been erased gently, like chalk on a board that nobody needed to read anymore. I sat there until the laughter inside faded into background noise like the hum of an appliance you stop hearing after a while. Then I stood, slowly, and began to walk. Not fast, not aimless, just forward. Behind me, the windows of the restaurant glowed warm and golden. But none of that light reached me. The bus stop was 3 blocks from the restaurant. I walked there slowly, the kind of slow you do when your body aches and there's nowhere waiting for you. Each step was deliberate, quiet against the wet pavement. Christmas lights blinked on storefronts, reflected in puddles like fractured stars. I passed a florist closed for the holiday. The window display showed a family of porcelain deer arranged in fake snow, noses tilted toward one another like they knew something I didn't. I stopped for a moment, watching the soft glow spill out onto the sidewalk, then moved on. At the bus shelter, I sat down again, not because I was tired, though I was, but because I needed the stillness. The street was quiet. I reached into my coat pocket, fingers brushing the edge of the silver box once more. It was warm from my body now, A brooch shaped like a holly leaf, her birthstone at the center. I'd bought it from a little shop 2 towns over, where the man behind the counter had said, "This one feels like a story." I'd nodded, thinking how perfect it would look on her winter coat. Now it sat in my lap, unopened, unwanted. I turned it slowly in my hands. Maybe I should have thrown it away, left it on that bench, or slipped it under her plate like a silent offering. But I didn't. Not out of hope? No. Hope had left a while ago, somewhere between her glance and the tilt of the paper crown. But something else had arrived in its place. Something heavier, steadier. A thought. A line I whispered aloud without meaning to. "You don't have to wait to be chosen." My voice surprised me. I looked around, no one nearby. I said it again, quieter this time. "You don't have to wait to be chosen." Because that's what it had been, hadn't it? Not just today, but for years. Waiting to be invited. Waiting to be useful. Waiting to be remembered. I thought about the tarp back in my fridge, softening hour by hour, the angel on the tree leaning, the scarf in the closet still smelling faintly of a childhood long gone. I'd kept it all, preserved it, like proof, like evidence that I mattered somewhere. But tonight, here in the cold, sitting under a flickering street lamp with a gift no one would open, I realized something small but clear. That holding on doesn't mean you're held. That keeping something safe doesn't guarantee it'll be returned. And maybe it was time to stop asking quietly for space. I didn't cry. I didn't break. But I did something small. I took the brooch out of the box, held it in my palm, the stone catching the light from a passing car, and then I pinned it to my own coat, right above the heart. The clasp was stiff. My fingers shook. But I got it. It looked strange there at first, like it belonged to someone else. But I left it, let it shine, because if no one else would receive my love, at the very least, I could wear it myself. The bus came 5 minutes later, groaning as it pulled up. I stepped on slowly, nodded to the driver, and chose a seat by the window. As we pulled away, I didn't look back, and the brooch, that little piece of green, caught my reflection in the glass. It wasn't glittering for anyone else anymore. It was for me. By the time I reached home, the sky had deepened to a navy blue, the kind that hums just before snowfall. The porch light flickered to life as I stepped up the path, motion sensor still working, though I hadn't had a visitor in weeks. I stood there for a moment, one hand on the key. The brooch still rested on my coat, the green stone catching the porch light. It didn't sparkle exactly, but it glowed, gently, like something that had waited a long time to be seen. Inside, the house was warm. I hadn't left the heat too high, just enough to keep the cold from settling into the baseboards. My coat came off slowly. I draped it over the back of the armchair, then paused. With careful fingers, I unclasped the brooch. Not to hide it, to place it on the mantel, not where the family portrait used to hang. That wall was bare now, stripped back to its pale paint and the faint square outline of what had once been centered there. No, I set the brooch in the middle of the mantel, atop a small linen coaster. One of the good ones. It looked oddly regal there, tiny and upright like a badge. Then I turned to the kitchen. The tart was still out, exactly as I'd left it. The crust slightly softened, but still holding its shape. I took a plate from the cabinet, the good china with the blue trim, and sliced a generous piece. No ceremony, no waiting. Just me, a fork, and the quiet sound of the knife against glass. I brewed a cup of tea. Chamomile. I used the teapot with the crack in the spout, the one I kept meaning to replace but never did. It had character, and tonight that felt like a reason to use it. I lit a candle, just one, Not the scented kind, plain white, short and wide, with wax that melted unevenly. I liked how it flickered, how it filled the kitchen with a kind of hush. At the table, I sat across from the empty chair that used to belong to memory. But I didn't feel empty. Not tonight. Tonight, the house didn't echo. It settled. I took a bite of the tart, sweet, just slightly tangy, the way she used to like it. But it wasn't for her anymore. It was for me. I chewed slowly, letting the flavors unfold, letting the moment stretch. The window beside the table showed only darkness now, the glass a black mirror. My own reflection looked back at me. Older, yes. Worn in places, but not gone, not invisible. The plate was half finished when I stood. Not because I was done, but because I had something else to do. I went to the closet in the hallway and pulled out the little box where I kept wrapping paper and string. Buried under the ribbons was a stack of envelopes, pale blue still unused. I took one out, sat back at the kitchen table, and began to write. It wasn't a letter. It wasn't a goodbye. Just a list. Not like the ones I used to keep for groceries or birthdays. This one was different. At the top I wrote, "Next Christmas." And under it, a train ride somewhere north, dinner at a cafe with candlelight, a new book, fresh pine for the windowsill, something red to wear, not a plan, not yet, but a promise to myself. That next year, I wouldn't wait in airports for people who forgot I was coming. I wouldn't sit by the door with food growing cold and hope on hold. Next year, I would choose myself. I folded the list, tucked it into the brooch box now empty of its gift, and placed it back on the mantel, not as a memory, as a beginning. The next morning was soft with fog, the kind that rose in like memory, quiet, low, and heavy. I didn't rush to dress. I stayed in my robe, made toast I didn't eat, poured tea I let grow cold. The candle from last night had burned itself down to a silver ring of wax. I didn't relight it, let it stay finished. The brooch was still on the mantel, perched like a sentinel. The list I wrote sat folded inside its box, sealed but not hidden. I moved slowly through the living room, dusting a few surfaces, straightening the small stack of books by the window, running my hand over the arm of the chair where my coat had rested. It still held a faint warmth, or maybe that was imagined. Then I went to the closet. Not the hall closet, the back one. The one I hadn't opened in nearly a year. Inside was the Christmas box, not decorations for a tree, but the leftover things I kept out of habit. Cards never sent, extra wrapping paper, a gift tag that read, "To Dad, with love." I didn't remember saving it, but there it was, edges curling, and tucked between a spool of ribbon and a bag of dry pine cones was the framed family photo, the one I'd taken down last birthday. I hadn't thrown it away. I hadn't been ready. Until now. I carried it to the back porch. The fog was lifting, revealing patches of frost along the grass. I didn't break it. I didn't burn it. I simply placed it in the donation box beside the old lamp and the set of mugs no one used. Someone else might need a frame. The image inside meant nothing without the warmth that should have come with it. Back inside, I returned to the mantel. The brooch caught the light again, a small green gleam against the linen. I picked it up and pinned it back to my coat, smoothing the fabric around it. It no longer felt like a gift waiting to be given. It felt like a crest, a seal, a small shining claim of who I was. Not as a mother or a placeholder or a backup plan, but as myself. I didn't leave a note. I didn't call to say goodbye. Instead, I opened the drawer by the stove, the one where I kept the spare keys, and took hers out, the one I'd copied years ago, just in case she forgot hers during visits that never happened. I carried it to the fireplace, lit a match, and laid the key gently on the hearth, watching as the flame flickered close and curled around its teeth. It didn't melt, Not fully, but it blackened, dulled, surrendered its shine. A quiet goodbye, not in anger, not even in sorrow, just in clarity. That I would not open doors that only closed behind me, that I would no longer shape my life around people who did not make room for me in theirs. Outside, the sun broke through, silver and low. I put on my coat, fastened the brooch, and I walked out the door, not away from anything, toward something else. The street was empty that morning, Christmas Day. The kind of quiet that used to mean wonder when I was young. A hush that hinted something magical might appear around the corner. Snow used to do that, didn't it? Whisper of beginnings. I didn't expect wonder anymore, but I found something else. The sidewalk beneath my feet was still slick with frost, and the sky had turned that pale, determined blue that only winter brings. I walked slowly, coat buttoned high, brooch resting just above my heart like it had always belonged there. No destination, just movement. Each step felt lighter than it should have, considering how heavy my life had felt the night before. But that's the strange thing about clarity. It doesn't always arrive with a crash. Sometimes it slips in like sunlight through a curtain you forgot to draw, softening everything it touches. I ended up at the park, the same one where I used to take her when she was small. A basket of sandwiches, a blanket, a book I never read because she always wanted to talk. She would swing for hours, legs kicking toward the clouds, asking questions about the sky, the grass, why ducks never seemed to argue. I sat on the same bench. It creaked the same way. Someone had tied a red scarf to the back slat. Frayed at the edges, probably dropped by a child or tied there by someone hoping to keep it from being lost forever. I reached out, fingers brushing it gently. It reminded me of hers, the one she left behind all those years ago, the one I'd kept in the closet. I hadn't looked at it in ages. Maybe I'd give that one away too. Maybe not. Some things don't need to be burned or buried. Some things just need to be let go, gently. The trees around the park were bare, black branches drawn like ink against the sky. I tilted my face to the sun, such as it was, faint but present. The air was crisp, clean. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The list. Next Christmas, it's still red at the top. And underneath, a train ride, somewhere north. Dinner at a cafe with candlelight. A new book. Fresh pine for the windowsill. Something red to wear. I unfolded it fully and added one more line. No more waiting. A small thing, but final. I refolded the page and slid it back into the brooch box in my bag. It rested quietly like a promise made and believed in. Across the park, a child in a green coat tossed breadcrumbs to a gathering of pigeons. His father stood nearby, smiling softly, not rushing him. I watched the boy laugh, his cheeks pink from the cold. It didn't make me ache. It made me remember. I'd had that too. I hadn't been forgotten my whole life. Just lately. And that was a sorrow. But not a failure. Not anymore. A few hours later, I returned home. I reheated the rest of the tart. Not out of sadness, but because it tasted good. I read 3 chapters of that book I'd always meant to start. I played an old record, the one with a scratch that skipped during the chorus. I let it skip, let it be imperfect. That night I lit one more candle, just one. I didn't set the table for 4. I didn't check my phone. I didn't rehearse old conversations in my head. I just sat, hands in my lap, a small smile, unforced. And when the flame finally burned low, I walked to the tree and looked at the angel near the top, still leaning, still imperfect. I didn't straighten her this time. I left her as she was, slightly off, a little tired, still standing, like me. Fade out. You don't have to wait to be chosen. You can choose yourself, and that's enough. That's everything.